separate quadrants of money, try and segment that out to come up with some type of a process to throw a little bit at these things, but keep the majority into real asset-based, conservative, passive private equity.
If you're not conscious about your investment strategy, you won't end up where you want to be, not financially or as a human. On this show, we interview highly successful investors and share how they overcame limitations to become unstoppable forces of success. If you're ready to learn what it is to be a conscious investor so you can end up where you want, keep listening.
Welcome back, Conscious Investor. You know, the best place to make new friends and to expand your network and expand your mind and your abilities is to attend events. How many times have you heard me say that already on the podcast, Conscious Investor? So I don't know what your holdup is. If you haven't been to an event this year in 2023 or whatever year it is when you're listening to this, you need to book at least one event. Now, I will share with you, and you know, I do share with you some of my favorite events. This is an event I will be at next March. This is the Real Estate Wealth Builders Conference. It is such a fantastic event. My friend Dustin Heiner is the one who organizes this event, and it's phenomenal. So with that said, my guest today, and for your pleasure and enjoyment, maybe cautionary tales involved, all sorts of, we're going to go all over the place about investing. But I met Zach at the Real Estate Wealth Builders Conference, otherwise known as RubeCon, just this last May. And it's just amazing the caliber of people that you meet when you put yourself in a different sandbox. So again, Conscious Investor, if you haven't attended an event ever, or you haven't attended one this year, don't make excuses. Step out of that comfort zone and start meeting amazing people and expanding your mind. Zach, I am so grateful to have met you. And it was it was like towards the end of the conference. And I'm so grateful that we were able to just connect up and talk, and welcome to the Conscious Investor.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I enjoy doing these, and I enjoyed meeting you. I'm excited to maybe understand a little bit more about where you're heading with your ventures. But I enjoy talking about, how I became a passive one percenter, and I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but I get dopamine by talking about all the crap that's happened in the last 18 months and things that are still happening, to talk, about how you can lose a lot of money in real estate. And so I think there's a lot of nuggets on both sides that I like to share, and joke around with my buddies constantly on. And it's an asset class, and it's a mindset that I really enjoy talking about.
Well, we're kindred spirits because it's actually maybe problematic in my life how much I love discussing real estate in general. And I'm third generation in real estate. And so it presents, an interesting scenario, right? Like, oh, let's just talk about real estate. But you said something that I don't know that the conscious investor is actually familiar with. You said you're one of the passive one percenters. So for the conscious investor, why don't you explain what that means?
So, and sometimes I refer to myself as a half a percenter, because I think only probably half of the one percenters are doing it passively, probably even less than that, probably most one percenters. And I guess this was a term that came up. I mean, wasn't this probably in like the early, I don't know, maybe late 2000s or early 2010s? They started talking about this class of people that were too wealthy and not paying taxes, the one percenters, the two percenters. I think that's kind of the media vilified them. And now Forbes, Financial Samurai, Sam, there's a lot of people, they have these great articles, and they objectively talk about what this means, right? Take everything else out of it. It's an objective number. It's somewhere, I think it's around $400,000, and it's different if you look at it by state, right? Versus like an Ohio or an Idaho versus like a New York or
California.
But yeah, I mean, it's always been something I think, financially people want to be, right? They want to be to the top of the chain, a one percenter, which is not that crazy. Like, you're not on yachts and staying in huts in Maldives all the time, being a one percenter. That's like the tenth of a percenter or 100th of a percenter.
Right.
But it's a position where, unless you're in a real high cost of living, you are pretty set, right? You're not worried about mortgages and car payments. You're not worried. I think I heard it well on a podcast a little bit ago. They talked about the 3 stages of wealth, and the one is not worrying about your necessities, right? Your mortgage, your car payment, your other thing. The other one is not worrying about the bar bill, the restaurant tabs. Like, it doesn't matter what this tab comes to. And then the third one is the vacations. Like, it doesn't matter what this vacation. Yep, a vacation costs $2,000 a day or whatever it does. And so along those kind of lines, right? It's a place where, you're not worried about much. Your needs, most of your normal wants are taken care of. And and you can see that every year or so. You can see articles and updated on what that number is. And that was a goal that became a goal of mine to get there, and then not just have it actively, but to have it passively, where it comes in regardless of how late I sleep in. Well, I don't sleep in, but it becomes in regardless of what I do during my days. It's a good place to be. And I think the passive is the only way that really makes sense. Like, who cares if you're working 50 hours a week to be a 1%er, right? What time do you really have? But to have your freedom of time along with that income.
That is so powerful. Just to give conscious investor a little more context also, because I do a lot of reading, constantly reading, but recently in this marketing book, they were talking about the mass affluent, right? And so in this book, it characterized the mass affluent as being people who make $100,000 a year or more. When you think about it like that, it's like, oh, okay. And then you can scale up from there, from mass affluent into different stages of affluence. So it's really interesting, when you start looking into some of those metrics and things like that. And then, when you're into the ultra high net worth individuals and everything, the ultra affluent, it is very interesting. And to your point of, like all the hierarchy of needs and such and how that changes the spending, it definitely does. And life gets easier. It's, well, instead of being concerned about, how we're going to make the mortgage payment because you got a layoff or something. It's, well, how are we going to reinvest this so that we're continuing to build this passive income flow in our life?
Yeah.
So how did you get started? Like, what was a catalyst for you actually saying, like, I want this passive income? And
I went to engineering school. I went to General Motors Engineering Institute, GMI. Which, through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, probably the most prestigious engineering and operations management school in the country. It was a co-op school. Every 3 months you switch. You work for 3 months, you go to school for 3 months, and you're going to work. Originally it was started by GM and their suppliers. And then it soon opened up to really all automotive. And now the largest co-op employer it's called Kettering University now. They changed the name because it's GM is such a tiny fraction. It's not even the largest co-op employer anymore. Actually, the government is the largest employer of the co-op engineers and operations management professionals there. So working at FBI, CIA, TACOM, like naval and engineering services, and then like Raytheon and some other suppliers. And so a great school for, and today, even more so than then, I believe going to school for a 4-year degree in marketing or generic business or something is not the best investment for you. But GMI, on the other hand, or any other co-op type school where you're not just getting a degree, you're coming out with 2.5 years at a Fortune 500, Fortune 100 company. You're coming out with a lot more than the millions of kids a year graduating from all these state schools with just a generic degree that we likely don't have the jobs to support the $100,000 they spent on that education.
Right.
So that's why I went there. And it probably wasn't because I understood or was that intelligent when I was 18. It was more, I didn't want to go to school for all year. I was like, oh, I go to school for 3 months, I go to work for 3 months. And it was like, that seems easy, right? I can go to school for 3 more months and then go to work. I can make money. I can buy car stereos and soup up my cars. And I did read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in 1998 when it came out, but it was right over my head. Like there were some cool things in there about he was melting down the toothpaste to get the lead to turn into recycling or something. I remember there were some cool anecdotes or stories in there, but I remember telling my parents about him, and my stepdad worked, he was a laborer at General Motors, right? So that was one reason why I became aware of General Motors Institute. My mom, my dad did run the family business, but as a self-employed, right? He was a janitor, he was the accountant, he was the president and CEO, he was the head of marketing. He did it all. He wore all the hats and worked 60 hours a week.
He had a glamorous job.
So yeah, I read that book. Yeah. But so did the whole, W-2, and I believe like that's what was gonna get me to be Johnson, I think was what I wanted to be, right? From Miami Vice, and he had the Ferrari, and I was like, oh, day, and so I moved around for my career for Daimler Chrysler, and then to a subsidiary supplier. And then, so this was all in Michigan and Mexico. And then I was like, I want to come back to Ohio to my family and friends. And so in 2005, I transferred down to a job at the Timken Company, which is a Fortune 100 bearing and steel company, precision bearings and aerospace and industrial. And it was there where, after a couple of years, I heard of a guy who was buying rental properties. And this would have been, so like 2011, and I don't know exactly when he had started, maybe 2009, 2010. But I mean, he was basically getting like these checks in the mail, like credit card advances or balance transfers. And he was buying the house with that. And so we're Midwest, Rust Belt. These were houses he was picking up for, in that time, maybe $25,000. Maybe they needed $5,000 in work, and he could rent them out at $800 or $850. So you're all in $30,000, rented for $850, right? You're over 30% returns. But his key, though, after he would do all that, right? He's got this credit card bill and he's making payments, but then he goes to a portfolio bank, a local community bank, to do a cash out. And there was no seasoning at that time or anything. And they're going to go, oh, okay, yeah, this appraises at $65,000. We're going to give you 80%. So he just pockets, he pays off his credit card, and he pockets $15,000, and he cash flows $350, $400 a month. Whoa. So he starts doing that. I hear about him doing that. And we had a mutual friend, and that's kind of how I heard. And my friend started doing it. He bought a house in Akron, and he's doing it, and he's going for number 2. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I want to do that, right? This is great. Didn't understand financial freedom, hadn't taken the Matrix red pill yet to really understand that. But I was just like, oh, it's cool. It's a little bit of cash flow. And let's see, I think this is before we found out we were pregnant. I came across a duplex, and it was call it like a C- D+ area.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, I want to buy this duplex. Dad, okay, the numbers, I want to buy this duplex. I'm going to take this loan from you. I'm going to take this loan. We're going to do this. And I remember, maybe, I don't know what I was looking for, 20 or something. My dad's like, no. And I'm like, what do you mean? No, I know you've got the money. We have jobs. Like, we're going to pay back. And he said no. And I got mad. And I was like, he doesn't understand. And I was like, man, where am I going to get the money for this down payment or this? And so a couple months go by, and I end up talking to the lender at Huntington, who we had bought our home with. And they're like, oh, yeah, you guys are 2 W-2s, like one house. Like, yeah, we'll give you a loan. And Huntington was doing 30-year fixed investment loans at that time in 2012. And so I started looking with this agent. And while I'm looking with this agent, she refers me to a title agent, and I'm talking with her. And she actually was an old friend of my wife's. And she's like, well, have you thought about doing like rent to own? And I'm like, no, but I'm intrigued. So I'm not a landlord. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And they had done a rent to own on their house when they had moved. And so I get her contract and I'm looking at that. And we end up I found two houses at the same time, both, like 3 blocks from each other in Akron. And this is like this is a median income area, $55,000 income. I'd call it C plus, B minus. But these houses were going to rent for 900, 950, and I was going to be all in for 40,000 and 50,000. And just to give you an example, that $50,000 house so this is 2012. That was a 2004 built house, 4-bed, 2-bath, stainless appliances, attached garage, 8 years old for $50,000.
Oh my word.
It was the market.
I remember this part of the market.
Investing wasn't big yet in 2012.
Right.
And, there wasn't, I couldn't tell you how many millions of dollars every month were flooding into my area from California, from New York, Florida. Ohio became known, particularly the Cleveland to Canton area, one of the top 5 in the country in rental returns. And none of that was out there yet on Bigger Pockets or any of the forums. And
yes,
wasn't that widely distributed yet. And so, we could snag stuff like that. Turnkey, 50,000 renting for 900, an 8-year-old house. Did that, and we were having a child, and I was like, okay, well, yeah. So I had gotten a bonus at work. My annual bonus was what funded those down payments, and why I didn't need my dad or anything. So we put that $18,000 bonus right into those 2 houses. My wife was pretty nervous. Like, what are we doing? You're buying 2 rentals at once, and we just, we've only had our own house for a couple of years. But yeah, she's trusted me all along and through hundreds of more signatures. And so you bought those, and that's what I thought they were. I thought they were just going to be college funds. Because at that time I was still like pro college, and like, yeah, we're going to cash flow, $300 a house, $350 a house times 2 for the next 18, 20 years. And then we'll sell them, and boom, that's at least half a college.
Right.
And let's see, have that child. We end up moving for a job relocation just an hour away. And I thought that was it. I was like, I don't have any money. And then I realized, I have a 401k left at that company with a couple $100,000. And I can do a self-directed IRA LLC and then go cut checks for houses. And so I did that. And I bought like 3 or 4 more, and boom, and so those are rented. And I'm like, okay, well, again, I don't have any money again. And then I heard about a bank, the same bank that my buddy had been using that I hadn't used yet, a portfolio community bank that was going to lend on the rehab. I'm like, oh, okay, so I can find this house. They're going to lend to the rehab, and at closing, I'm going to get a check. I'm like, wow, okay. So, we did a couple of those where, I'm getting a check, doing the rehab, coming out of pocket very little, if anything. And renting this house out. Another, these houses all averaged in the mid 40s, renting for 900 to 1,000 at that time frame. So 2013, 2014, I found Bigger Pockets and lost a year probably just going through every post and forum and studying everything in Bigger Pockets, probably like 2013, 14. And then found Grant Cardone through a podcast or something. I don't think I was on a podcast maybe yet, but heard about him and got that book 10X. And I tell you, I had the right contractor, the right real estate agents, the right lender. And that book was just the foot to the pedal. Don't stop. It doesn't matter that we now have a toddler and an infant and we're moving again. And I've got an eviction and an empty house, and I have 2 houses under rehab. Nope, buy another one. Yep, buy another one. And so I guess make this a little shorter. So I probably bought 80 houses from 2012 2012 to like 2018. Maybe about 15 of them we flipped, and the rest all went into a rent with purchase option program. And just so some listeners are like, oh, rent with purchase option, I bet he's scheming all these folks and everything. So people do the program predatory. People can be predatory. I will never kick someone out for an end of contract. So as long as they're paying, they're in that house. I got people that have been in their houses like 9 years, right? And we just keep writing them another contract. So
yeah.
I don't care if they ever buy it, but I have an owner occupant mindset, not a tenant mindset in that house. So they are taking care of it. If they clog the drains, if they blow their furnace motor because they don't change the filters, they know they're responsible. It's a different mindset. And yeah, so we write 4-year contracts. And if they come to the end of the 4 years, we carry over all their credits. We'll write another 4-year. Your purchase price will adjust. And, in this market we just had, I had some tenants that made more money than I did when they bought the house, because their property nearly doubled, and, their purchase price was locked from 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So, that was some of the thing is my whole portfolio, let's call it, they were worth, 80,000 a piece. I was all in at 45. Those properties all became worth about 120. And some of those folks, right before they switched, right before they would have kicked up, they closed on them at 85,000. So, it can be very beneficial. Yeah. And so then in 2019 is where I felt I had enough single families and I wanted to diversify. And that was when I got distracted with, I got 2 neighbor friends and we bought a trampoline park, one of those kids trampoline parks.
Nice. Or was that nice?
It was great for the kids, but it was my nonprofit business, I call it. It was my nonprofit charity.
Yes.
But this was one of those, it's very interesting where, people can build a business like that cost probably $1.4 million when they built that park. And they crushed it for years until competition came in. Urban Air came in 10 miles away. Sky Zone came in 5 miles away. And so they went from, I think they were, I don't know exactly, but they were probably making 800,000 net income a year to 350. And so that's when it doesn't matter what all the equipment's worth, right? The park, right, is only going to sell for what it's going to sell for. And we were able to get it for, I think we got it for like 350,000. And we're like, oh, well, they've just neglected it because they were an out of town owner anyhow.
Okay.
And we thought we were going to do all these great things. And we did. We added some older kid, like ninja courses. We added a big soft play playground for kids, all these things to bring in different demographics. Because the trampoline park, okay, it's fun, but once kids have done it a couple times, I don't think it kept teenagers interested. And you really couldn't go there until you're maybe 3 or 4. So we thought with the ninja courses and the soft play, we would pull in those other demographics that we were missing. And then COVID. And COVID swept our legs out from under us after getting all that in place. And we struggled. We got shut down. And then after we were allowed to open back up, the parties never came back. And so just normal people coming in for open hours wasn't enough. I mean, our fixed costs were like $35,000 a month between rent and utilities and insurance was crazy. And so fortunately, we had a great space that, this is kind of real estate related. It was one of the most desirable spaces in the Canton area with 30-foot ceiling, high bay, dock doors right off the highway. And people wanted our space. Now, we don't own the building. We have the rights to the space. So our landlord knew we were struggling and, came to us and was like, well, hey, what if we just let you out of your lease? And I'm like, well, that doesn't help us. Like, we have an SBA loan now from the EIDL. We have our bank loan from when we bought it. We put our own capital into this. And So it went from that to an offer over what $250,000 for us to just leave because somebody wanted the space.
Wow.
And so it worked out of just controlling the asset, right, of the space, enabled us to get all our money back, make a little bit of money, and get out of there. And he got the tenant he wanted, from his perspective in real estate, right? He wanted passive, like 100% passive. And he has a server farm in there now. It's just servers and air conditioners. And,
oh, wow.
So he got what he wanted and we got out. But I lost a good, I think we owned it for nearly 2 years. And I wasn't really buying a lot of houses because I was distracted with that. But I was starting to do syndications. But it distracted me. So I guess my key thing there is, when you've got a model that's working, stay away from the butterflies and the shiny things. And there is something to diversification, but I don't know. Just be careful of just, kicking the thing to the side that gets you to where you're at because you want something more glamorous or different. And I always laugh, like when people would hear that I had SkyMax. Oh man, will you sponsor my kid's baseball team? Will you sponsor the gymnastic team? Like, can I just give you $50 and go away? Like, no, we don't have $500 to go sponsor your team. Like, we don't make any money. Like, but nobody's like, oh, you own all these Akron rental properties. Like, oh, like you're awesome. Like, no, they're just quiet. They do good. Great tax advantages, no taxes, but yeah, so during that also the private equity, the syndications was another thing that I found that I started vetting out sponsors, through some podcasts. I would hear about them and talk with them and went into like DeRosa Capital with Matt Faircloth and then found Accountable Equity, Josh and Melanie McCallan. And I've actually done, I do little things with Josh and Melanie here and there, vetting out other things. There was a property here in Ohio that I looked at, and I really like their group focused on the resorts and the wedding venues, and they really have a good niche there. And like ATM funds, and I did a commercial lien on a bowling alley that's one of the better things. That does really good here locally. And then, things were going great through COVID. And again, like the shiny things though. So instead of, I'm a member of 2 groups. So anybody who's in syndications would definitely want to look into Private Investor Club, PIC group, and the 506B group, which is it's background checked, passive investors, private investors. No, you can be invited as a syndicator or if you have a relationship to one, but you won't be in there saying I invested in this and it's awesome. Like,
or join me, here's my deal.
Yeah. They're very controlling of that, but they do bring in sponsors and syndicators, and really dig into their underwriting, what the deal is. And then we negotiate better terms. So we can get lower minimums and higher prefs and these different things, lower asset management. But, once I got into that, I'm looking at them like, man, these guys are talking about, 13% returns, 12, 13, 14, 50 MLG capital. Like, yeah, they've been around for 40 years. Okay. But that's boring. And I was like, wow, Loren and some of these other ones, 25, 30% returns. And then they did, they sold one deal that I'm in, and in 18 months, right, 52% IRR, you almost doubled your money. Like, oh man, I'm going more that way. And I chased a lot of these things. I don't want to say I'm gullible, but I tell the truth and I believe people. Yeah. And when they tell me these things, I believe they've done the proper due diligence and underwriting I chase these returns, and it's burned me very badly here locally with some hard money lending. A couple times I've backed the wrong people as I tried to get passive and not be a flipper myself, but I'm going to partner and back a flipper because I love to coach, right, and teach. And the W-2 world, I think we kind of skipped over this, but I got tons and tons of training and continuous improvement and Toyota production systems and lean leadership development. And so I tend to, I think more systemically and am definitely more of a data guy than a lot of people who, maybe didn't go to college and went right into business. My best friend, 8th grade education, but he's a business owner of $2 million companies. But he's not a data guy, right? He's got a notepad and all this. And so, I try to help him more on, okay, we got to get some pivot table charts in. We got to be pulling in this data. And I mean, he's doing phenomenal without it, but I'm like, imagine, how many things could be leaking out when you're not looking at all these and going through it. But that helped me a lot through, all of my efforts. And then I love to coach people in that and do that. And so I tried to be passive in real estate, and it's burned me by not doing it myself. And I'm still trying to recoup a lot of those.
Oh, that is rough. And so did you have syndications that you were part of, the investments with private equity groups that went bad? Was that mostly you backing, doing hard money loans, or where would you say the biggest pitfalls of the snakes that got up and bit your ankles came from?
So locally here with partnering and loans has been two of them, in hindsight, these are what I call the rocket ship guys on Facebook. They're always posting the rocket ships to people, and they want the rocket ships in their post, right? They, they'll say this and they'll post fire, rocket ship, and then they post it in other people's and they want it in theirs. And I have had 2 horrible experiences backing what I call rocket ship guys, where they're trying to sell everything they can and post everything they can, and they're more concerned with that than the fundamentals of what the business is that they're doing. On the private equity side, I was with, so the first bad one, I don't know if we call this private equity, but I invested locally with some guys who were moving my money to a partner of theirs, and they were clear about that. And I knew the people I was lending to had lots and lots of assets. And so it's okay, you guys got to PG this money. And they were, we haven't done that before, but okay, we'll do it. And so me and my friend and actually 2 others, we had over $2 million with this group at 30% returns. I guess there's the first warning bell, but hey, they have tons of assets. They're local. And that paid out great monthly returns for about 7-8 months. And then we heard about this group up in Akron called AEM that is now everything's locked down Ponzi scheme. They were a real estate Ponzi scheme, this and that. And I'm like, wouldn't that be funny if our money down here was invested up with them? And it was the next day when I get a text message, yep, your money was with them, and don't worry, you knew nothing to worry about your principal. And I'm like, well, yeah, we have PGs with your company that owns hundreds of houses, plus you guys personally, and I'm not worried about it. And so the money came back. We had some discussions about the interest that was accruing and past due that they were just ignoring during the 7 months it took them to pay us back. But I guess a good lesson here, and I see a lot of people that do this, is the point scrapers, people scraping points to move money in other places. And they ended up having to refinance and sell millions of dollars of real estate to pay off people that they gave personal guarantees to, that the money was gone. And that AEM, it's lost I think they had 140 million in investor deposits. Now they've been paying it out for years. So some of those people will get, some of those people were already made whole, but they may have kept reinvesting. I mean, who knows? It's all out there in this SEC receivership now. But yeah, you really don't know how much the people we had lent with were totally out. It was just 2 million just between four of us that had there. So, I mean, they might have had another 10, 20 million. But if they have PGs on all of it, were they just going to let it go? But I don't think they wanted to tarnish their name. But yeah, I mean, I don't like the selling of something that's not mine. There's lots of people out there who push other syndications, or they push this, they push that, and they're getting a half a point or a point or something of the money they can raise, or they're doing point scraping like this. There's another situation. I'm not going to mention any names, but there's another one out there that's pretty big. I don't know how to say this. I was invested with, and the money was with another person. How do I say that? We knew the money was in other businesses. This person wasn't using it themselves. It was with a company they were representing and with, and that company is done. Like, it's going bankrupt. There's articles out there. It's a big, 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 big deal. But this individual uses their name to raise money for it. And their name, they made a mistake of using their name and their business name that they have other businesses tied to raise this money. And so as soon as I heard about this thing going, I was like, all right, my note was coming done. I'll take that back. And I was like, how in the world is he going to do this? They did pay it back. So the funds came. I know they're still raising. I don't know where the funds.
Oh my gosh.
from.
How can they even consciously, ethically still be raising?
They're saying that there's other investments that they're going into. And we could talk about this offline.
But no.
It's a very interesting thing. I don't know. But that was one of those where I lent the money out there in a note with no collateral. I mean, just a name and a big name. There's a big name behind this note. But yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. Any money that I am lending is going to be first position lien on real estate.
Yeah.
In other private equity. So I'm in another Ponzi. So I got all out of that one.
Oh my God.
But I got into another Ponzi scheme. This was with Freedom Contracting, Clean Energy Technologies Association, Roy Hill and Eric Shelley. And I had vetted this out through an investor who had been with them for 4 years. And this was me trying to diversify again, right? I felt like I had tons of real estate directly, a lot of real estate and syndications, and I had no energy. I have no energy plays, nothing. Yeah. So this was in carbon capture and natural gas. And a buddy of mine locally who's very well connected in all sorts of groups, accelerated investor, fueled investor, I don't know, some group, but he's well connected. And he brought in this guy who's been with Freedom for 4 years, getting great returns. We brought on Eric Shelley. We had a webinar, talked through stuff. And I was like, yeah, great returns. 100% depreciation because you're an active participant in oil and gas. So it's 100% active loss, and diversification, right? Boom, here's my money. And so the returns were supposed to start 6 months after, right? They had to make the equipment, put it on site with ExxonMobil, and then they get their royalties from ExxonMobil every quarter. So I send my money in, and 6-8 weeks later, my buddy calls me up. He sent money in as well. And he said, I got bad news. Well, I don't know what bad news you have for me. Like, well, we're not partners in anything. And then I not thought about this. And he's like, dude, that's a Ponzi scheme. SEC just took everything. And I'm like, what? And yeah, all the articles are out there on the judicial websites or whatever. And the good news in this case is, and they say this is extremely rare. So it was an investor who just, it didn't smell good to him.
Yeah.
And he was able to connect with ExxonMobil and find out that they have no relationship with this guy. They have none of his equipment. They don't know what he's talking about. And they've shown him the webinars and nope. And so he gets the SEC involved. They watch the bank accounts. And I'm sure it was my money, because it was while they were watching, it was when I was like the last round of investments that came in. And so they watched investor money come in and then investor money go out to other investors. And so they locked down and they've got like 60 million is locked up right now. So they said this is very unusual because Ponzi schemes normally don't get found out until they're out.
Right.
So, okay, what's the lesson there? Man, I mean, they were tenured, right? Four or 5 years old. They had pictures of the equipment. I vetted out through, Josh. So I talked to a principal of accountable equity, Josh McCallan, who I've been with for years. Great guy. He didn't vouch for Eric, but he knew of him and had trained with him and knew of him through they'd been in mutual like fundraising and building their companies together. And so he'd known of him. I'm like, okay, well, at least that's kind of a check. Like he knows of him. And so, yeah, that one, the money will be tied up there for quite, I don't even know how long, but at least it looks like, hopefully at least like 50, 60, 70% should come back because they'll do like the guy who had been in for 4 years, like if he had only, let's just say he had only done that initial investment, he would have gotten, 150% since then. They'll do a clawback. For anybody who's not familiar, you can read about or watch this on the Madoff documentary on Netflix. So they do a clawback to make all investors whole. So if a certain investor has gotten 150% and somebody's gotten zero and there's not enough money to get him, they're going to do clawbacks. So that's where, those people that were early on in Madoff and like, I think there's people that lost houses and because they had to get things clawed back.
This is there's some there's a golden thread in all of the cautionary tale of like, how do we invest? There are some common themes that I've noticed is shiny object syndrome, chasing returns, and having money that is not in the direct control of a single person, like a single group where it's like, it sounds like every time this is going sideways, it's like, well, I invested here, but it was really going to all these other places. Those are like common little themes right there.
Actually, all three of those, because the investment with Freedom and CETA, the money was going to Freedom and they were giving it to CETA. And so what Eric Shelley and the Freedom Group are saying, they had no idea. But, which could be true, but how can you sit out there and raise money and lead all these webinars and all these things if you have not actually seen the equipment in the field?
Boom. Yeah.
So, you can say all you want. I don't think the SEC is going to be like, oh, because they were the ones directly raising, you raised $100 million, but you didn't know it was a Ponzi. You're fine. No.
And yeah. That whole concept, and there's so much power behind, doing the due diligence as somebody who is, receiving investor capital at all. Like you need to go do your due diligence. You need to go see it. You need to lay eyes and know. I'm a control freak when it comes to partnerships and such. And this is one reason your stories and conscious investor, I don't mean to go down this rabbit hole necessarily because they're not all bad, but like fund to funds and the funds right now that are taking place. And they're not saying that funds are bad. I'm just saying I'm very concerned about people not using funds correctly and appropriately and doing exactly this. Like, oh, well, we had a fund to funds. We were just putting it into all these, but like, do you even, then your investor has no idea really what they're investing in. They just know, oh, I'm going to get these returns. it just, to me, at this point in the market cycle and where people are and how people are doing things, it's just sloppy and messy. And I'm like, I just don't want anything to do with like that space of funds, fund to funds. I can see doing a fund. I get that, single entity funds. But when you start putting money here, there, and everywhere, and your investors are just blindly like, I trust you, cautionary tale right there.
Yeah. I mean, and then one of the, let's see, so we talked through all the worst ones, I think. Yeah. And then recently here, a company that, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I can't mention them. Loren Capital, private equity, 20,000 doors across Florida, Texas, Alabama. And that was the deal, right? It was in, we made 52% IRR in 18 months. Great. We had 2 equity multiple, 1.9, phenomenal. They are, they're flippers. They are not long-term hold. They are buy a good asset, tune it up, reposition it, do whatever, and out in 3 years. And yeah, so we had a big capital, not a big capital call. We had like a 6% capital call last week. And so, yeah, I mean, it came across like all assets because of habitational insurance premium increases. And I think they could have, I was on the webinar, I pushed back like, hey, we need to see like, because it didn't really have anything like, hey, here's what it's going to be. You're going to get these capital calls. You either need to participate or you will receive an unknown dilution based on what we have to do to go get the capital to cover this, which I do kind of understand. They don't know how painful it's going to be if they have to go get hard money, go sell equity to go cover the shortfall. I guess one, it's like, well, since most of these were purchased, rents have all gone up a decent amount, right? At least 10, 15%, 20%. So don't we have extra cash flow to cover the habitational insurance premium increase? That was something that they could have spelled out a little clearer, was where's this extra cash gone? And then on the call, they did show us, okay, we did get basically all the Florida properties got like 100%, around like 90 some to 106% increases. And with commercial, I don't know if it's like with your stuff, the premium is due upfront and full, no monthly, quarterly payments. Yep. So let's just say it was a $40,000 policy and now it's $80,000 due, and they got 30-day notice of the increase in premium. So that's why it all came down pretty quick. But it's just brought up questions around, we're looking now deep into some of the financials of the properties that, they're not turning the units as fast as the plan was. And I think that's more of the issue, is just vacancies because they're not turning them. So is there contractor problems, and just a lot of questions. But again, I'm trusting the group, and to send a wire for 28,000, you don't like to do it. And you really don't sure if you're sending good money after bad, but that unknown dilution, like, I don't think you can just take that. Like, you may have been a 1% holder in this, beautiful 400 unit downtown St. Pete, and now you go to 0.1% because you didn't kick in, the 6% that they wanted because they had to sell it to some crazy hard money. And so, this is going to be telling now. I know there's a thread started on the PIC group of bankruptcies and capital calls. And I wasn't familiar with this group, but a big group out west, 40,000 plus doors, all grown in the last like 4 years or something. Interest rates jumping, insurance premiums, and they're in foreclosure. Money was fluid everywhere when you print $9 trillion and more people in real estate, and sponsors were being aggressive and trying to pull in that money, right? Like hungry hippo game. You remember that, where all the balls are out there?
Oh my gosh, I loved that game.
I think that's what, in hindsight, was going on. And, the true, yeah, like MLG Capital, who I talked with, and yeah, 40-year track record and never, just perfect, right? But I think 12%, like, and I was like, yeah, let's talk in 6 months, man. Look at this Lurin deal. Look at this freedom contracting natural gas, right? I blew him off, and, because it just wasn't attractive enough. And so now paying for it, right?
Slow and steady, sure and fast. Like it's
Mhm.
sure is fast, right? Like it's amazing how that works. Like that's one reason why we don't do a ton of deals, but having a background in the residential real estate space and watching what took place multiple cycles, but especially I've said more than once, subconscious investor, this will sound, very familiar, and that is that the commercial space right now feels very much the way residential felt before the big crash, where it's like, oh, everybody was flipping houses, everybody was, making money hand over fist on these, single family houses, and then it all fell out. And I feel from what I've seen, and I've said this for a few years, is that's what's happening in the commercial space, where it's been easy. People have access to the information. You have a lot of highly educated professionals who already in their professions manage multi-million dollar contracts and accounts and have, maybe manage a team of, 10 to 50 people. So they feel competent and they're skilled, but you don't know what you don't know. I mean, many of our skills are translatable, but you can't transfer an entire, decades of experience within real estate. And I mean, if I were to go into, say, engineering of any kind, I mean, the past informs us of the present and the future. We can kind of see, okay, this is a narrative we've seen played out. It'll have its own iteration. We can be prepared for that. But, we have a lot of people that forgot that, oh, well, commercial real estate can be affected no different than residential real estate. And these principles are true regardless of what part of the real estate, sphere you're in. These principles hold true and they are grounded and steadfast. Like, oh,
Well,
yeah.
so given all this stuff that's happened, it's like, yeah, I went back and bought 3 single families so far this year locally, like, boring, a little, but they're 24, 26% returns. And yeah, and I'm letting the cash be stuck in them. I'm not buying them with loans. I'm not cashing out. I'm like, hey, I put it there. I know. Yeah, I'm not going to do anything dumb with it. And I don't like 8%, I don't like 8.5% interest. So no, I'll just leave them there. And yeah, and they cash flow. Yeah, I mean, they're cash flowing $1,100 a month. That's boom, times 3. So, I mean, it's significant when you're not taking loans and trying to leverage and grow anymore. I mean, I'm pretty confident or comfortable. We've got 45 single families now, and we got 26 multi-units, a 13-unit apartment building, and some duplexes and triplexes over in another city with a contractor partner who, yeah, I mean, those are not rent to own, obviously, but,
Right.
He's over there, and yeah, so he can handle them, and he likes that. And I bring in the cash and the mentoring and the banking and insurance and lending relationships. And that's been the one winning partnership of the many things that have tried. And it's not sexy at all. Like it's C-class, city, units, but they were picked up off market for a steal. And yeah, I mean, they're cash flowing and we're turning them around. And yeah, I mean, their big profit potential is in selling them to out of state, which is where the money is still just flying in to buy things at, basically like a 1% rent to price. If it's renting for 1,300, they're paying 13 or 130,000.
Yeah.
So it's still a lot of California money flying here. And that's where I sold a handful of my rentals in the last 2 years when, if a tenant didn't buy it and we had an exit, right? Especially if it was bad, like if it needed $10,000, $15,000, I was like, no, I mean, I can sell these for 130,000 now, 3 times what I had in them. Like, let's thin this down and let's take that money into private equity and show to chase some different things. But no, it's been, it's still been a great, much better than working a job the last couple of years. So it's still, even with some of these headaches and stressful things and potential losses, it still beats going and doing something for much less of an hourly rate for somebody else on their time.
That's right. I love it. I love all the cautionary tales, and there are lessons learned. And they're important. I won't get into it, but I mean, I've learned my hard lessons in like e-commerce, and
I did one too. Yeah, I lost.
Exactly. We didn't even go down that. But it's.
I forget about that one. That was like a little $25,000 store, but yeah, gone, done. Did you have an Amazon store?
I had a Walmart store, and that's a whole cautionary tale. But God is good, and I walked away. But at one point there was over there was a chunk, 6 figures leveraged on the American Express card situation when it got shut down. So conscious investor, if you want to hear that story, you're going to have to go back a couple months on the episodes, and you'll be able to hear that entire story, because it taught me so much and it informed my investing. That is one, when we talk about smart money versus scared money and patient money, right? And so it's like, I have smart money that is patient. Like, okay, no, I'm not going to go after the crazy, like, yes, we have strong returns, but I don't have to push and force, because the moment you start trying to force it that's when I've lost sleep at night. And I'm like, there is no forcing ever.
It's interesting what you said. And you got me wondering if I should take and get an Excel and separate quadrants of money into like patient, fast, smart, or investing, speculating, gambling. And then when something comes in, okay, is it backed by a hard asset? No. What's the proven track record of the sponsor? No. All right, this is gambling. How much is left in my gambling bucket? Oh, okay, I could put $5,000 in it or something. I'm not throwing hundreds. And then, and try and segment that out to come up with some type of a process to throw a little bit at these things, but keep the majority into real asset-based, conservative, passive private equity, or single families locally that I know can't lose. I forgot about the whole e-com thing, but that was another one where all these operators or even social media guys could hear and see, oh my goodness, how many people did they bring in a week paying 40, 50 grand for a store?
Oh my gosh, don't even get me started.
Why aren't I doing this? Why don't I start? Hey, I'm going to hire this guy and I'm going to bring in 500. So the one I went through, I think I'm on a non-disclosure. So yeah, I mean, he was no basis in e-com, right? He was social media. And I knew it was kind of toward the end, because I've been hearing and seeing guys doing it for years, maybe 2 years, 3 years. But I was like, it's something different. And look at these returns.
Diversify, passive investing. That's what I took the bait on.
And the credit card points, I'm going to get so many rewards to add into my other things. And so, we went in and we made, good money for like 3 months on Walmart. And then Walmart cut, it's okay, we're going to move you to Amazon.
They want it. Oh gosh, we're probably the same person. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're not doing that. No, we're done. Lesson learned. Bye.
I see. I took the move to Amazon.
Okay.
That's what we had to do, because we actually, and this operator was, regardless of how it went tactically, he was very neglectful, but we were in agreements where we would get our principal returned if we hadn't gotten payback in 18 months. And he did honor that mostly, but most of these people just got left with nothing. They didn't have any type of guarantees. So
Right.
he did some things that were legit. But while there were problems going on, very neglectful of the things that like a continuous improvement expert is emailing you about every day. Cause I'm seeing these orders, I'm seeing shipments going the wrong places, I'm seeing the wrong product getting shipped, I'm seeing all these bad things happen. And you guys are like, oh, well, yeah, but in the long run and this and like,
Yeah.
why are we selling trampolines? Like that is such a big, bulky item that if there's an issue, now you're paying return shipping, and we're selling just stupid things that were horrible. And yeah, so finally after Walmart, but then they tried to sell on Facebook too. So they almost got my Facebook shut down through violating terms of service
Oh
in
my
my
gosh.
Facebook marketplace. It was another
Yeah.
horrible 9 months or something of that mess.
Yeah, I steer clear of all of it now. I'm like, man, what has always been true for me? Real estate. What kind of real estate? Cool. I will stay in my lane. I know what works, and I'm going to continue to build sure-footed. We'll be sure-footed as we build along the way. And it's just such a great way to go. All right, Zach, we have to wrap up this conversation, but it's like, I feel like it's story hour. It's like lessons with Zach, So
there's still so much probably still, but yeah, there's a lot to go on. It's especially the last 18 months of the challenges. So before, yeah, if you listen to the podcast I was on, 18 months ago, it was all roses, and everything was great. Just real estate and seemingly great passive private equity investments. And then the last 18 has been, all these local things and the capital calls and the SEC Ponzi schemes. And yeah, it's all coming out here now.
Yeah. And it will. It will get louder as the markets contract and things like that. And this is where my dad and my grandpa, they always said, they're like, it's fine. When markets are good, there's enough pie for everybody. Everybody will be there at the table. And you just wait. When everything contracts, the professionals will be there still doing it. And they're the ones that will be around still doing it. I'm like, ain't that the truth? So, Zach, the conscious investor is listening and they're like, wow. And if they want to get in touch with you, is that possible? And if so, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. So you can get in touch with me, Zach Zimmer, on either one of those.
There you go, conscious investor. Zach, I can't thank you enough for your time and for all the amazing stories that you managed to land. You're like a cat with 9 lives. You know what I mean? Like you've landed on your feet. It sounds like you've landed on your feet, which is really amazing.
Well, and to say to that, the one thing we missed on, like we lived for so long, well below our means to let that snowball grow. And now the snowball, even with big chunks being taken out of it, it can still keep going and keep growing again. So, that's been the biggest thing on the other ones is what I've said is, I tell people all the time, I'm going to quit my job and start wholesaling or so. No, horrible idea. Like keep your W-2s, you can get loans much easier and live well below your means for a long time until your side job makes 3-4 times what your W-2 does. And then you can walk away and that thing will still keep going. So that's the biggest reason why we've been able to keep landing on our feet.
Yeah, that is very true. Oh my goodness. Yes. Conscious investor. I know you've enjoyed just all of these. These are the things that people usually aren't going to talk about. And it's like, I try to extract that from people because there is a downside. There are amazing investment opportunities out there. Okay. But you do need to be wide-eyed and things can go sideways, and they do go sideways from time to time. And sometimes in Zach's case, as he's ventured into these things, is a little more than maybe the average bear, but go into every investment wide-eyed and really know who is behind it and know where the money is going. Be able, have the ability to track where that money is going, so that you can have smart money, not scared money, and you can have patient money. Okay. Because anytime you're looking to turn a fast dime, it's probably not going to work out very well.
Yeah.
Until next time, conscious investor, live big, love bigger, and do great things.
What's the big deal about investing in apartments? Why is it better than investing in a slew of single-family homes? I've compiled a lot of information on why investing in a multifamily, also known as apartments, will help you reach your investment goals. Head over to 3keysinvestments.com and download the Why Invest in Multifamily guide today.